This was supposed to be the night she revealed everything. She only came home for Christmas dinner, wearing old jeans, driving her beat-up car, and pretending to be the struggling daughter everyone expected her to be. Her sister bragged. Her parents judged. Her brother stayed silent. Then came the final insult, the garage. A cot. No heat. No respect. But before the night was over, one phone call exposed the truth. She was unemployed. She wasn't lost. She was the hidden founder of a billion-dollar tech empire, and her sister's entire career now belonged to her.
My name's Chloe, I'm 29, and I secretly run a sustainable luxury empire worth millions. To my family, I'm the artistic flake who never grew up. They've dismissed my ambitions my entire life, making me feel like a complete outsider. Tonight, at our annual Christmas dinner, my sister Megan just smirked as my mom told me to park down the street so her business partner wouldn't see my clunker. My stomach twisted into a knot. For 5 years, I have listened to their condescending advice and kept my success completely hidden. They have no idea that's all about to end. Before I get into how I went from the family disappointment to their biggest shock, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories. I grew up in Los Angeles in a family that only valued real careers. My parents, Richard and Helen, had a very clear blueprint for success. You know the type. A USC degree, a respectable profession, and a big house in the suburbs to show for it. My older sister, Megan, who's 36, was their shining example. She did everything right. She went to grad school, got her real estate license, and became a star developer at a massive firm, Sterling Properties. Every family get-together was basically the Megan show, a highlight reel of her latest big deal. My younger brother, Leo, who's 26, was following right in her footsteps. He was now a rising analyst at a downtown investment firm and just got a huge promotion. My parents were so proud. And then there was me, the family puzzle they never bothered to solve. Since I was 12, I've been obsessed with design and sustainable materials. While other kids were at soccer practice, I was teaching myself textile science and building e-commerce websites. I'd spend entire weekends in my room, sketching designs and sourcing eco-friendly fabrics. To my parents, it was just a strange little hobby. Chloe, when are you going to start studying for your law school exams? My dad would ask. Firms don't care about your little art projects. That gap between my family and me only grew in high school. While Megan was homecoming queen and captain of the tennis team, I was in the art studio, turning thrift store clothes into runway-worthy pieces. My teachers said my vision was groundbreaking. My parents just said I lacked focus. You're always jumping from sewing to website sites, my mom would say. Why can't you just stick to one thing that's serious, like your sister? They didn't see that I wasn't just hopping around. I was building a brand. Each skill was another piece of the foundation I needed. I thought business school would be a fresh start. I enrolled most to make them happy, but my entire focus was on my brand. By my second year, a major fashion magazine featured one of my designs, and suddenly investors were calling. I knew I had something big. So, I dropped out to commit to it full time. My family's reaction? You would have thought ID announced I was joining the circus. You're throwing your entire future away, my father said, his voice cold with disappointment. We did not raise our daughter to be a quitter. And what's the end game with this fashion thing, my mother added. There's no stability, no pension, no real future in that. Megan was visiting that weekend, and she just gave me that pitying smile that I hated. It's fine, Mom. Some people need to chase their little dreams before facing the real world. After that, it was a constant pattern. Every holiday was a comparison of Megan's latest success versus my latest hobby. She'd show up in a new company car, talking about closing multi-million-dollar property deals. My parents would brag about her to anyone who'd listen, but would immediately change the topic if I came up. Megan just secured the new downtown high-rise, my dad would boast. Then if someone asked about me, my mom would say, "Oh, Chloe is being creative." The breaking point was Christmas 3 years ago. I had just secured my first $2 million round of funding. I was walking on air. But as I tried to share the news, Megan cut in to announce she'd just been made a partner at her firm. "Oh, that's my girl!" My dad roared, completely forgetting I was even talking. As they all raised their glasses to Megan's success, I just shut down. I was done trying to get their validation. From that moment on, my work would be my secret. Let them think I was a struggling artist. One day, they'd find out the truth, but it would be on my own terms. That night, I officially incorporated my brand, Aura. It started small, but quickly exploded into a leader in sustainable luxury. Within 2 years, we had boutiques in Paris and Milan. By the third year, we were a globally recognized brand. I was buying out textile mills and pouring money back into Aura, all while staying completely anonymous. I decided to be a silent founder, letting my head of design be the company's public face. It was a good strategy to keep competitors on their toes, but the real reason was personal. I couldn't handle my family knowing the truth. Living two separate lives was draining. I owned a beautiful home in Malibu but told my family I was sharing a tiny apartment with roommates. I'd drive to family dinners in a beat-up old Honda, while my collection of Teslas and a vintage Porsche stayed hidden away. They'd lecture me about finding a real job on the same day I had finalized a multi-million-dollar deal with a European distributor. Then, 5 years after I dropped out of school, I made the biggest acquisition of my career. Aura bought a huge portfolio of commercial real estate, including the undeveloped waterfront property that Megan's firm's Sterling Properties desperately needed for their flagship project. The irony was suffocating. My perfect sister's career-defining project was now completely at my mercy, and she didn't have a clue. The final paperwork landed on my desk a week before Christmas. The very development that represented my sister's ambition was now just an asset I controlled. Should I send the official rejection of Sterling's bid? My assistant, Ben, asked. I shook my head no. Wait until after the holidays. Let's let everyone have a peaceful Christmas. What I didn't say was that I needed one final holiday playing my role. One last dinner where I was the family screw-up, and they were completely in the dark. The family group chat pinged a few days later. Dinner at 7. Let us know if you can make it. It felt more like a court summons. I typed back, I'll be there, fighting the urge to just say no. After 5 years, I already knew the script. It was going to be the same old performance. A few hours of hearing about Megan's amazing accomplishments, my parents' thinly veiled pity for me, and my brother Leo's quiet approval of it all. I drove my old clunker to their house, though I had a garage full of better options. That car had become my costume, but it was also my shield. It was a firm reminder that I wasn't there for their validation. When I pulled up, a new black Porsche was in the driveway that I didn't recognize. Inside, it immediately made sense. Megan had brought a guest, Daniel Sterling, the founding partner of her company, her boss. The very man she was always trying to impress. Chloe, you remember Daniel, right? Megan asked, with a tone implying that, of course, I should. We had never once met. She was in a designer dress that probably cost more than my entire supposed wardrobe. Daniel stood beside her in an expensive suit, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. I don't think so. Pleasure to meet you, I replied, extending my hand. I had purposely worn an old band t-shirt and ripped jeans. Chloe, you're here, my mom called, waving me away. Come help me with the appetizers. Megan and Daniel are just talking business with your dad. And there it was. In 30 seconds, I was demoted to kitchen staff while Megan held court. I chopped vegetables while listening to the confident laughter coming from the living room. So, Daniel, Megan says this waterfront project will be the crown jewel of the city, I heard my dad say. It will be, Richard, if we can ever get the new landowner to the table, Daniel replied. This anonymous owner won't even take our calls. My hands froze over the cutting board. He was talking about me. Some mystery buyer? My dad asked. Exactly, Megan jumped in. Some faceless corporation that has no idea how critical this development is. Their own daughter, I thought, a small smile touching my lips. Chloe, how's that little online shop of yours doing? My father yelled out, suddenly remembering I was there. I almost laughed. My little shop was the luxury brand that held her massive project in its hands. It's coming along, I replied, my voice perfectly neutral. Megan came into the kitchen for more wine. Look, I know you're probably struggling. A friend of mine needs a part-time assistant at her boutique. It's mostly just steaming clothes, but it's a start. I could give her your name, she offered. The pity in her voice was so thick it was suffocating. She had no idea her own career was hanging on my decision. I appreciate it, but I'm okay, I said quietly. Suit yourself, she shrugged, returning to her guest. As I served the dinner rolls, I overheard my parents whispering in the hallway. At least Leo's career is stable, my mother sighed. I just worry about Lila. 30 and still playing with those little tech projects. Megan's tried to guide her, my father added, but you can't help someone who won't get a serious job. The old insult still stung. My phone buzzed. A secure message from my COO show about the ATEX consulting deal. Retention offers are drafted. Leo Vance is on the list, per your instructions. A sharp, satisfied smile touched my lips. Leo had no clue his career was in the hands of the woman dicing carrots across the table. The final straw came before we even cut the cake. I went to the hall for a work call and heard Megan and my mother talking in the guest room. We put Leo in here, obviously, my mother said. Your father and I are in our room. Liam's in his old room, and you have yours. So where's that leave Lila? Megan asked, her voice thick with fake pity. Well, the study is full of gifts, my mother said. I figured the garage is fine, it's just for one night. Perfect, Megan laughed. The garage is totally her style. She must be used to slumming it in that little startup of hers. My blood ran ice cold. A garage in Chicago. In December! No heat. My hands were trembling with rage as I walked back to the kitchen. My expression a perfect mask. 5 years building an empire while they belittled me, and my Christmas gift was a freezing garage. The dining room looked like it was torn from a magazine. Crystal glasses gleamed next to heirloom china on a lace tablecloth. It was holiday perfection, right down to the place cards that exiled me to the far end of the table. My mother had placed Leo at the head, like some kind of king, with my father at the other end. Megan was on Leo's right, my mother on his left, and Liam sat next to his sister. I was in the corner by an empty chair, a perfect symbol of my position in this family. To be fair, Leo looked a bit awkward with the whole arrangement. He kept catching my eye with a questioning look. So, Lila, he finally asked, what kind of AI development do you do? Before I could even answer, Megan let out a tiny laugh she tried to cover with a cough. Oh, Lila just plays around with some coding projects, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Nothing on the scale you're used to at Apex. I run a firm that builds advanced AI platforms, I said, looking right at Leo. His expression changed, a spark of actual interest in his eyes. Really, that's a huge growth sector. We're actively looking for companies to partner with in that space. What's your core focus? Leo Megan interrupted, touching his arm. Don't be a nerd. Tell them about that new Dubai project. And just like that, the spotlight was yanked away from me again. I watched Leo hesitate, then pivot at Megan's instruction, launching into a story about his firm's global expansion. My single chance to connect was over. Dinner continued as it always did. Megan held everyone's attention with stories of her major client victories. My parents listened, absolutely beaming. Liam would chime in with his own legal successes, getting the same glowing praise. My attempts to join in were met with a polite pause before the subject was changed. We all knew our parts perfectly. This is phenomenal, Catherine, Leo said, finishing his steak. You're a fantastic cook. Thank you, Leo, my mother replied, looking absolutely thrilled. It's just wonderful having the whole family home for the holidays. Speaking of, my father cut in, we need to sort out where everyone is sleeping. It's getting pretty late. A tight knot formed in my stomach. Here it comes. Leo, we have the guest room all made up for you, my mother announced. Fresh towels and everything. Megan, you're in your old room. Naturally, my father added, and Liam is all set. Every eye in the room swiveled to me, and I saw a flash of guilt on my parents' faces. Lila, my mother started, her voice sounding forced and bright. We've set you up in the garage. There's a cot and some warm blankets. I saw Megan's lips twist into a smirk, while Liam suddenly became fascinated by his dessert. The garage isn't heated, I stated, my voice completely flat. You can plug in that old space heater my father offered, like it was a brilliant solution. It'll be fine. Leo looked genuinely shocked. The garage? It has to be freezing in there. Lila won't mind, Megan chirped. She's always been the tough one, right? Sis? Her condescending voice made me want to scream. In that moment, I knew she planned this, bringing Leo home just to watch me be humiliated. I'm sure we can find another spot, Leo started to say, looking embarrassed. It's okay, I said, my voice dangerously even. I have to work late tonight anyway. After dinner, my mother showed me to the garage to see my luxury suite. It was even worse than I had pictured. The space was crammed with old patio furniture, a dusty treadmill, and boxes of junk. A cheap camping cot sagged in the middle of the floor. A pile of musty blankets sat next to a tight ancient space heater. It's only for a night, my mother repeated, refusing to meet my eyes. And you're always glued to that computer, so it won't even matter. I said nothing as she fled back to the warmth of the house. The second the door clicked shut, I sat on the cot and pulled out my phone. The weather app showed 28 degrees. It wasn't much warmer in here. I opened my laptop and saw an urgent message from my board. They needed the final authorization on the Apex Consulting acquisition before the morning bell. At 9 a.m., an email would land in every single inbox, including Megan's and Leo's, announcing Helios Systems as their new owner. It would also name me as CEO. As I looked over the final pages, a new plan began to form in my mind. Why should I wait? Why not take control of this narrative right now? My phone buzzed. It was a text from my assistant, ready to send the executive memo tonight if you give the word. Every director at Apex will get the alert instantly. I glanced at the clock. 8:30 on Christmas Eve. Leo and Megan would both see that notification. Leo's reaction would be something he couldn't possibly fake. My thumb hovered over the reply button. 5 years. 5 years of their casual cruelty. Was I really going to let them stick me in a freezing garage on Christmas Eve? The side door creaked open and Leo stepped inside looking guilty. Hey, sorry to just walk in, he said. I just wanted to see if you were okay. This is all kinds of wrong. Before I could answer, his phone started vibrating loudly. Then it buzzed again and again, a flood of alerts. He frowned and pulled it out. That's strange. Urgent notifications from the board on Christmas Eve. He opened the first one, and his face went from puzzled to completely floored. This says Apex has been acquired by Helios Systems, he stammered, his eyes finding mine. Effective immediately. But that's not possible. We would have been told. His phone rang, and he picked up instantly. Leo Vance. Yes, I'm just getting the emails now. No, I had no warning. The CEO wants to talk with me tonight on Christmas Eve. While he listened, his eyes got wider and he slowly turned to stare at me. He was finally actually seeing me. The pieces were clicking into place inside his head. She is right here with me, he whispered into the phone, his voice strained with shock. The garage suddenly felt like the Arctic as Leo stared, phone pressed to his ear. I could just hear my CEO asking if he was with Lila Chen, the CEO of Helios Systems. I think I am, Leo answered, his eyes locked on me. I held out my hand for his phone. May I? He handed it over like he was in a dream. The moment felt unreal, sitting on a broken cot in my parents' cold garage, about to blow up 5 years of their story. David, I said, my voice crisp and confident, a tone my family had never heard. Yes, I'm here with Leo. The schedule has changed. Please go ahead with the full board notification tonight. We'll send the company-wide email in the morning. I could almost feel David's confusion through the phone. Tonight, ma'am? It's Christmas Eve. I'm aware of the date, I said, watching the blood drain from Leo's face. The situation has changed. Please proceed now. When I hung up, I gave the phone back to Leo. He took it like it was on fire. You're the CEO of Helios, he said, more to himself than to me. You bought Apex. I did, I said, shutting my laptop. But he motioned vaguely at the room. The garage, the camp cot, the small heater fighting a losing battle with the Chicago winter. Sleeping in the garage at Christmas, I finished for him. Yes, so it would seems. The door to the house burst open and my sister Megan stood there, her own phone in her hand. Her face was ashen. Leo, are you seeing these alerts? Something big is going on at the firm. They're saying we've been bought. By her voice died as she saw the look on Leo's face, then followed his shocked stare to me. What is happening right now? Maybe we should all discuss this inside, I suggested, getting up from the cot. It's getting a little cold out here. In a daze, Leo and Megan followed me into the house. The warm kitchen was a shock as we walked in on my parents and Liam laughing over some dessert. All settled in, honey? My mom asked without looking up. There's been a slight change of plans, I announced calmly. We need to talk. My tone must have carried a sharp edge because my mother froze mid-wipe. Dad looked up from the sink and my brother Liam stopped, holding a plate. What's wrong? Dad asked, his eyes darting between me and Megan and Leo's shocked faces. Leo's phone vibrated again, a harsh sound in the quiet room. He glanced at the screen, then gave me a baffled look. You should probably answer that, I said. It might be HR calling about your bonus. His eyes went wide, but he answered, putting it on speaker like he always did. Leo, it's David from the board. Did you see the wire? Helios Systems just acquired us. Their CEO is calling an emergency VP meeting, first thing tomorrow morning. I hear she's been a mole inside the company for months, is that right? The kitchen went completely still. Every head turned towards me. David, I have to call you back, Leo muttered, ending the call. Maya, Megan began, her voice strained. What is he talking about? What is going on? I looked at them, all standing in the kitchen where I'd always felt invisible. The moment I had dreaded and wished for was finally here. I'm the founder of Helios Systems, I said, my voice perfectly level, and this morning my company acquired Vantage Tech. The silence was so thick you could feel it. My mom's sponge slapped onto the floor. Dad's jaw just hung open. Liam was still frozen in place, a dinner plate in his hand. Megan finally broke the silence with a high, bitter laugh. That is not possible. Helios is a massive company. They're worth billions. Yes, I confirmed, they are. But you never even graduated from college, my father stammered. You were working for some tiny startup. That tiny startup was Helios, I told him. And we haven't been tiny for a very long time. You're lying, Megan snapped, but I could see the first crack of doubt in her eyes. This is some kind of sick joke. I just took out my phone and opened a secure link to the Helios network. I logged in, then turned the screen so they could all see the CEO's command dashboard. This is our live global operations data, I explained. Our current market valuation is roughly $12 billion. We have 8,000 employees worldwide, which now includes everyone from Vantage Tech. Leo slowly began to nod, his face a mask of sudden understanding. The new security, the server migration, the management shakeup, that was all you. Every last bit of it, I confirmed. But why? My mother finally whispered, her voice cracking. Why would you hide this from us? For years, you thought I was a failure, I cut her off. You made that pretty clear every chance you got, every holiday, every phone call. We were just worried, my father insisted. We wanted you to have a secure future. No, I said, feeling years of resentment boil up. You wanted me to be just like Megan. To live the life you picked out, and when I wouldn't, you wrote me off. You never once asked what I was building or showed any genuine interest. That's not fair, Megan jumped in. I tried to help you out. I sent you job listings. You sent me ads for receptionist positions and treated me like I was a child, I shot back. You brought your vice president to Thanksgiving and made me eat in the den just so you could impress him. Leo winced, looking suddenly sick. I didn't know you were in there, he said quietly. I never would have let that happen. My mother stepped towards me, her face a mix of awe and something that looked like fear. Maya, honey, if we had known how successful you were, we would have been so supportive. We just want you to be happy. Please stop, I said, raising a hand. Don't pretend you would have treated me better if you knew I had money. That somehow makes this even worse. The kitchen was silent again. My phone started buzzing off the hook with alerts as the news went public inside both companies. Outside, a light rain began to streak down the window panes. So, what's next? Liam asked, trying to break the tension. For Vantage, I mean. For most of the employees, very little will change, I said, relieved to talk business. We're restructuring the senior leadership, but we aren't planning any mass layoffs. Megan's face went completely white. The unspoken question was hanging there. Am I fired? A few years ago, I might have enjoyed holding this power over my sister. But now, the win felt empty. No, Megan, you're not losing your job, I said. Your marketing campaigns have been effective, whatever our personal problems. But as of Monday, you'll report to a new director. Relief flooded her face, but was quickly followed by a new concern. Is everyone going to know that we're sisters? That's your call, I replied. I maintained my privacy for professional reasons, not just family ones. That's over now, but we'll figure out how to manage the office chatter. My dad cleared his throat, trying to reconcile the daughter he knew with this stranger. Where do you live now? He asked abruptly. You always said you had a tiny apartment. I own a penthouse overlooking the park, I told him, and apartments in London and Tokyo near our other headquarters. My mother sank into a kitchen chair, looking utterly stunned. All this time, we had no idea. That was the point, I said. I spent years starving for your approval, and then I just stopped trying. I poured all of that energy into my work instead. Leo's phone buzzed again. He shot me an apologetic glance and stepped out of the room. I heard his voice change, becoming the firm VP handling a corporate takeover. Megan just stared at me as if she'd never seen me before, and in a way she hadn't. The box she always put me in the failed younger sister was never real to begin with. I should get my luggage from the car, I announced into the silence. I can find a hotel room. No! My mother cried out, jumping up. You can't. It's Christmas Eve. You have to stay with us. The stark irony of her desperate plea was almost too much to bear. The guest room is all ready for you, my father added. Leo can take the den. I'm not putting anyone in the den, I said, my voice like steel. Not even for one night. Leo walked back into the kitchen, putting his phone away. That was the chairman. They want an emergency board meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow. He looked at me with a whole new level of respect. Your team is efficient, he remarked. Efficiency is one of the core values at Helios Systems, I answered. The entire atmosphere in the room had changed. My family suddenly looked like visitors in their own home. The power dynamic that had defined my life was simply gone. I need some air, Megan muttered, walking toward the sliding glass door. After a moment, I followed her outside. A fine layer of frost was catching the porch light on the deck. Megan was clutching the railing, her breath clouding in the cold. Are you actually going to keep me? She asked, without looking at me. Or was that just for them? I joined her at the railing and told her I was serious. I meant it. You are good at your job, Megan. Our history doesn't change that. She gave a slow nod, her gaze fixed on the dark yard. I have been so horrible to you. Yes, I agreed. You have, and now you work for me. She let out a short, harsh laugh. The irony is, life has a twisted sense of humor, I replied. Finally, she turned to me. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. For all those years I bragged about Vantage, you could have bought the whole company with pocket change. Why let me make a fool of myself? I thought about it, looking for the real answer. At first, it was to protect the company. We were growing quickly and were still exposed. After that, it just became how things were. And maybe I was just waiting. Waiting for what? For any of you to really see me, I said. To ask about my life and actually listen, without knowing about the money. To be interested in who I was, not what I was worth. Tears filled Megan's eyes, something I hadn't seen since we were children. I don't think I know how to do that. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I went back inside to grab my suitcase from the car, walking past my family as they stood like statues. When I returned, Leo was putting on his coat. "I've got a car on the way," he said. "I figured I should probably give you all some privacy tonight." "You really don't have to go," I told him. "I think it's for the best," he answered with a small smile. "Plus, I have about 200 emails to read before that meeting." "I hear the new boss is tough." For the first time all evening, a genuine smile touched my face. "Is that the words on the street?" "Her reputation is legendary," he said, his tone serious. "But seriously, what you've built is incredible. That security encryption you created basically revolutionized the entire industry. I'm actually very excited to see what you have planned for Vantage." And with that surprisingly sincere compliment, Leo was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my family. The living room was dead silent. We all took our usual seats, but nothing felt normal. My parents were in their recliners. Liam perched on the arm of the sofa. Megan sat in a corner chair and I took the ottoman. We were separated by a canyon far wider than the room itself. Finally, my dad spoke. "A global tech empire." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Yes, and you did it all on your own, while we had no idea." My mother's voice just faded away, like she couldn't bear to finish. "While you all wrote me off, I finished the thought for her." Sophie looked down at her hands. "Why keep it a secret so long, Maya? Why not just tell us?" The question was simple, but the answer was a tangled mess of pride and fear. In the beginning, I had to prove it to myself first. I tried to explain. I was so scared of announcing it and then failing. But as Nexus Innovations grew, I saw something. You never asked about my work. Why would my success change anything? I didn't want a prize for making money. I wanted your faith in me. "We always had faith," my mother said, but her voice was paper thin. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You loved an idea of me, not the real person. The daughter who was meant to be just like Sophie. When I built my own life, you just stopped looking." My father stared at the rug, suddenly finding it fascinating. "We were worried," he mumbled. "That's a parent's job." I told him there's a world of difference between being worried and writing someone off completely. "You never asked about my plans. You just figured I was playing at being a businesswoman." Mark cleared his throat. "You tried to tell us about your first seed round. Mom cut you off to ask Sophie about her new Audi." My mother's face turned scarlet. "I don't remember that." "I do," Sophie whispered. I remember thinking her little project was meaningless compared to my promotion. The confession just hung there, heavy and shocking. In all our years of competing, Sophie had never admitted to deliberately shutting me down. "So what does Nexus Innovations actually do?" Mark asked, and he sounded genuinely curious. "Besides buying out Pinnacle Tech, I mean." For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of hope. A real question. "We began with advanced data security," I said. "My encryption protocols set a new industry standard in a few years. After that, we expanded into AI privacy and corporate defense systems." Mark nodded, taking it all in. "So acquiring Pinnacle was strategic. Their hardware completes your software ecosystem." "Easy, exactly," I said, impressed he grasped it that fast. "And you built this whole thing without a degree?" my father asked, his voice flat. "I learned what I had to learn," I told him. "For everything else, I hire experts." That's what a good CEO does. My mother suddenly got up and went to the kitchen. She came back with a magazine from a pile of mail. On the cover was a silhouette with a headline, "Nexus and its Phantom CEO, the tech world's biggest mystery." "This arrived with the Tech Journal last month," she said, her voice tight. I never put it together. I didn't even read it. The irony was almost too much to bear. The proof of my whole career was sitting right here, treated like junk mail. "So, does that mean you re-wealthy?" my dad asked awkwardly. "Yes," I said plainly. "Extremely." Sophie let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. "All those times I offered you money to help you get by, you must have thought I was a pathetic fool." "I wasn't laughing," I told her. "It just hurt. Being your little charity case while I was building an empire." "So are you going to fire me?" she asked again, raw panic finally showing. "I already said no," I answered gently. "Your job is safe. You'll just be reporting to a new director, that's it." Relief washed over her face as she nodded. "I don't deserve that." "It's not about what you deserve," I said. "It's just business. You're excellent at your job, and our family issues don't change that." My father leaned forward. "I have no idea what to say, Maya. We were wrong about you. Just 100%, completely wrong." It was the closest I would ever get to an apology from him. "I kept secrets," I admitted. "That part is on me." "But we gave you a reason to," my mother said softly. "We made you feel like you couldn't even share your wins with your own family." Another painful silence settled over the room. You can't undo years of damage in a single evening, no matter how honest you are. "So what happens now?" Mark finally asked, ever the pragmatist. The question hung there. How do you fix a family that was built on a false narrative? How do you move on when the past just got rewritten? I don't know, I confessed. This wasn't how I planned it. I'm still trying to figure it all out myself. Will you stay the night? My mother asked, her voice filled with a desperate kind of hope. Not on the cot. The guest room is ready for you. The thought of sleeping under this roof, with all these emotions swirling, felt like too much. But leaving the night before Christmas also felt wrong. I'll stay, I said. But I have to make a few work calls first. My executive team is aware, and they're going to have questions. My father nodded, and for the first time, I saw genuine respect in his eyes. Of course. You have a company to run. That simple validation, something I'd craved for years, felt surprisingly good. As I reached for my laptop, Sophie stood up. Let me help you with your bags for the guest room, she offered, like a fragile peace treaty. We walked to the garage in a tense quiet. The space felt even more frigid now, the insult of the folding cot stinging worse than before. I am so sorry about this, Sophie said, gesturing to it. It was my idea. You thought it would be funny? Making me sleep in a freezing garage on Christmas Eve? I asked, staring directly at her. She had the decency to look ashamed. It sounds horrible when you say it like that. Because it was horrible, I said. Billionaire or not, it was a cruel thing to do to your sister. She nodded. I have spent so many years seeing you as my rival, not my family. I don't know how to stop. Maybe that's how we start, I said, grabbing my suitcase. We stop the rivalry. We try to be sisters. As we walked back inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. Car is waiting. I'm taking off. The board is unanimous and completely behind you. Merry Christmas, boss. I couldn't help but smile. At least the acquisition was going smoothly. Inside, my mother had made up the guest room with her best linens, her own silent apology. My father had a fire roaring in the fireplace, trying to warm a house that had felt ice cold just hours ago. Lying in a proper bed that night, not on a garage cot, I replayed the day's insanity, a 5-year secret life, completely blown open in a matter of hours. 5 years of keeping my family at arm's length, all erased by a truth I never wanted to tell. Tomorrow would be chaos, the official memo to every Pinnacle employee, the press release with my name on it, the endless calls from the media. But right now, in this quiet moment, I felt a surprising sense of relief. The weight of that secret was finally gone. Whatever comes next, I'll face it as myself. I could hear Sophie on the phone across the hall, her voice hushed, probably doing damage control with her own team at Pinnacle. I could hear my parents whispering in their bedroom, likely trying to make sense of the daughter I'd become. We were still fractured, but for the first time in a long time, we were all looking at the same broken pieces. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't understanding. Not yet, but it felt like a start. Christmas morning was heavy with an awkward silence. I woke up early out of habit and found my dad in the kitchen, staring into a coffee mug. Merry Christmas, I said. He practically jumped. Merry Christmas, Maya. He poured me coffee like I was a client, not his daughter. Sleep okay? Better than the garage, I said with a little bite. He actually winced. About that, it was wrong. I didn't realize how cold it gets in there. It wasn't much of an apology, but was all I was getting saying, so I nodded. I have calls to make before people wake up, I told him, checking my phone. The memo goes out to all Apex employees at 9. Of course, he said, then asked, should I leave you to it? His question just proved how much of a stranger I was. No, I'm good. I can work from anywhere. He watched, fascinated, as I set up my laptop on their cluttered dining table. As I handled team messages and approved a new feature launch, I felt his eyes on me, really seeing this side of me for the first time. By 9, the whole family was in the kitchen. My mom was making a huge brunch, trying way too hard. Chloe was glaring at her phone, and my brother Leo just watched the tense, quiet drama play out. Should we open presents now or after we eat? My mom asked, desperate to pretend things were normal. After, I said, closing my laptop. It's 9 o'clock, the email just went out. As if on cue, an alert buzzed on Sophie's phone. She scanned the screen, her face unreadable, before her eyes finally met mine. It's official, she announced. Snexus Innovations has acquired Pinnacle Tech. Founders and CEO Maya Shaw will address all staff after the holiday. My parents just looked at each other as the full reality finally hit them. Shaw, my father whispered. You're Maya Shaw. Of course I am, I told him. Whatever else has happened, I am still part of this family. I thought I saw a flicker of something in his expression, maybe even pride. Breakfast was like navigating a minefield of unspoken feelings. We were all tiptoeing around years of anger and neglect, searching for some new kind of normal. Then we gathered around the Christmas tree, and the reality was just painful. The gift said it all, the usual thoughtful presents for Sophie and Mark, and then the generic, impersonal afterthoughts for me. A boring scarf, a cheap lotion set, a bestseller I would never read. But they weren't ready for the stack of presents I'd brought, the ones I almost left behind when I debated just getting a hotel room instead. Every gift was in simple, tasteful paper, things I'd chosen for them months ago. You brought presents, my mother asked, her surprise just a bit too sharp. Of course, I replied. It is Christmas. I started passing them out. For my father, a signed first edition by his favorite historian. For my mother, a ceramic vase from a local potter she'd mentioned loving one time. For Mark, a vintage drafting table he'd always wanted but would never buy himself. And for Sophie, an original framed photograph from a little gallery in Paris she adored last year. The sheer, unadulterated shock on their faces was worth everything. It was the clearest proof that even when they'd stopped paying attention to my life, I had never stopped watching theirs. How did you even know about this vase? My mother whispered, her fingers tracing its glaze. I think I mentioned that artist's shop. What? Years ago? I said. I was always paying attention. My dad cleared his throat, genuinely touched by the book. This must have been incredibly hard to find. Not hard, I said. Just took a little digging. Sophie just stared at the picture. You remembered Paris. You talked about that gallery for a month when you got back, I reminded her. You said you'd never seen light captured like that before. They exchanged awkward glances, the chasm between their generic gifts and my very personal ones hanging in the air. Well, we have one more for you, my mom announced, rushing into her room. She returned with a small, badly wrapped box. We got this morning. Your father ran to the 24-hour pharmacy while you were on your calls. Inside was a cheap silver frame, holding a blurry printout of the tech article about Aura, the one they had totally ignored. We thought you could sign it, my dad mumbled, staring at the floor. Since you're the mystery founder everyone's talking about. It was a clumsy gesture, but it was the first time they ever acknowledged my work. I took it from him and managed a small smile. Thank you. As the morning went on, the feeling in the room actually started to change. My parents began asking me about Aura innovations, hesitant at first, then with real interest as I described building it from nothing. My brother Mark asked smart questions about my plans for expansion. Even Sophie, once I promised her that her job was safe, started to engage with genuine curiosity. So all those holidays, you were glued to your phone. You were secretly building a billion-dollar company? Mark asked, totally floored. Basically, I said. Last Easter, I was closing this massive investor deal while you all thought I was just being rude on email. Is that why you always left family dinners so early? My mother asked. You had to work. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. The work was definitely a huge part of it, yes, but it was also because being here, well, it was really difficult for me. Because of how we treated you, my father stated, his directness shocking me. Yes, I admitted quietly. It's hard to sit at a table for hours feeling like the family disappointment. A heavy silence filled the room. My mother dabbed at her eyes. I got out some old photo albums, she said suddenly, grabbing one from a shelf. From your high school engineering club. She flipped to a picture of a teenage me with some other nerdy kids, holding a trophy from a state robotics competition. A competition my parents didn't attend. You took first place, she whispered, tracing the award in the photo. I remember now. We couldn't make it because Mark had a swim meet that same day. It's fine, I said, a reflex from years of having my wins overlooked. No, it is not fine. My father cut in. We should have been there. At least one of us should have been there for you. Sophie looked over Mom's shoulder. I had no idea you did all this. I guess I was kind of in my own little bubble. You were encouraged to be, I replied, without any anger. We were all just playing the parts we were assigned. The conversation kept going right through lunch, slowly unraveling years of missed signals. No big apologies or dramatic, tearful embraces. It was just a quiet, growing awareness of the roles we had all been playing. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my head of marketing. Acquisition announcement is officially live. Your inbox is exploding with congrats and interview requests. The team is handling everything. It's all going to plan. I showed the text to Sophie, who was obviously worried about the takeover. It's going to be okay, I promised her. The integration team handles the heavy lifting. Your day-to-day work isn't going to change that much, except now my little sister is my boss, she shot back with a wry little smile. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in what seemed like forever. Well, there is that, I conceded. That evening, we all came together for dinner, and it was so much more relaxed than the formal meal from the night before. The conversation actually flowed, free of all the old secrets and resentments. My father asked about Aura Innovations and our next steps. My mother asked about my life down in Austin. Mark was curious about how I manage my employees. And Sophie, amazingly, told stories about Pinnacle Analytics, asking for my take and finally closing the gap between us. She admitted that launching their new security software had been a complete marketing disaster. We just couldn't make the average person understand why they even needed it. That's a classic mistake in our field, I told her. You get stuck selling the tech instead of the feeling. At Aura, we design backwards. We start with how we want the user to feel safe, in control, connected, and then we build whatever delivers that feeling. That is brilliant, she said, and for the first time, I heard real professional respect in her voice. In that moment, I saw what we could have been this whole time: allies, not just competitors. And I knew it wasn't too late to build that. Later, while we were having coffee in the living room, my father finally asked the one question that had been hanging over us. Why did you hide all of this from us, Clara? I get the business reasons, the privacy, but why from your own family? This was the real heart of it. The question underneath everything that had been said since my big reveal. I needed to see if you could love me for who I was, not for what I did, I said. I wanted you to value me for my character and my passion, not my bank account or my title. And we failed, my Moses whispered. Yes, I said softly, until yesterday you did. So now what? Mark asked. Where do we even go from here? I looked at their faces, so familiar but so changed by this new truth between all of us. Now we start over, I said, not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by deciding not to let it define our future. As Christmas Day came to a close, I realized something. The big reveal of my success didn't give me that satisfying, I told you so moment I dreamed of. It gave us something quieter and much more valuable, a genuine chance to reconnect. We weren't magically healed. We still had years of hurt to work through, but for the first time since I was a kid with a crazy idea, I felt like they finally saw me. Not perfectly, but for the first time, for real. It was a beginning. 6 months after that Christmas, I stood on the deck of my lake house, watching my family pull up for a summer barbecue. The change in our whole dynamic was obvious in the way they walked toward me. No more tension, no more tiptoeing around. My mom gave me a real hug, a universe away from the stiff greetings of the past. This place is gorgeous, Clara. You have to give me the real tour this time. My dad came next, holding a good bottle of bourbon and a tech magazine. You made the cover again. We thought we'd add it to the shrine. After Christmas, my parents cleared a shelf in our office for articles and awards about my work. Their pride was finally out in the open, not just reserved for Sophie and Mark. Our weekly video chats had become an actual thing. They weren't just a chore to get through, but real conversations. My parents now loved to brag to their friends about their genius CEO daughter, even if they sometimes got the details of my latest ventures comically wrong. Sophie showed up last, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. The acquisition started out rough, but she'd finally found her place in the new company. Our work and family lives were beginning to mix, and somehow it improved both. The deans with such new campaign concepts, Sophie said as we chopped vegetables. We had never cooked together like this. The focus groups are responding just like you predicted they would. Your invest pitch last month was brilliant, I told her. So smart, so confident, and your data was flawless. She just beamed at the compliment. I had a great teacher. Mark came in with his laptop. Got a second? I'm drafting a business for a sustainable fashion brand and wanted your thoughts. Now that was new. It all started after New Year's when Chloe's husband Daniel asked for my advice on his app idea, igniting this huge ambition in him. I became his unofficial startup mentor, and we were suddenly talking about product roadmaps and seed funding. Sitting on their back porch, I couldn't help but think how much had changed in just a few months. It wasn't just mixing business with family. It was deeper, like we were finally seeing the adults we'd all become. I've been thinking, my dad said as we ate, about what you said back at New Year's. About wanting to be known for who you are, not just for your company's valuation. I nodded, the memory of that raw conversation rushing back. I realized that's what I've always wanted too, he confessed. My whole identity was tied to my job title, to being a success, and I forced that same pressure on all of you, especially you, Maya, because you were the only one who ever really pushed back. It was probably the most real thing my father had ever said to me. I think we were all stuck in that trap, Chloe added, tying our self-worth to our salaries. I was so afraid of not being the perfect daughter, with the safe corporate job, that I couldn't be happy for anyone else, she admitted, looking right at me. Especially not for you. Because you built your success your own way, from scratch, and on some level, that just made my safe path feel like a failure. As her confession settled in the air, I realized how much I had changed too. The burden of my secret ambition had been crushing me. Being honest with them didn't just heal our family, it healed me. I stopped needing them to approve of me, and ironically, when they finally did. I built my own walls, but I left the gate unlocked. And that vulnerability became a new kind of strength. Professionally, the ripple effect was huge. Revealing myself as the founder of Vivid Spark Media created a ton of buzz online. But in the end, it made our brand story that much stronger. Our own family drama inspired us to create new company policies on mental health and flexible career paths. I also started mentoring young female coders from overlooked communities whose ideas deserved a real shot. That felt better than landing any investor. Best of all, Chloe and I had become this incredible team. Her sharp financial sense was the perfect complement to my creative vision. We'd finally gone from being rivals to partners. Remember the garage? My mom asked, pulling me from my thoughts. That question used to make me see red, but this time I just smiled. It's a little hard to forget. We turned it into a proper home office for you, my dad announced, beaming with pride. For whenever you come to visit. We put in new windows, good lighting, a huge desk that looks out over the garden. The message was crystal clear, and it was filled with love. The place that was once my exile was now their open invitation for me to come home. That's so nice, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's really, really nice. That night, everything felt right. I thought about how far we'd come as a family and the journey still ahead. We weren't perfect, not by a long shot. We would probably fall back into old habits and hurt each other by accident. But we were trying, we were growing, and we were finally being honest. Last New Year's was the moment everything shattered. It stripped away all our defenses and made us look at each other, really look. It was painful, yes, but it was necessary. It cleared the way for something new to grow. I learned that real success isn't about your achievements, it's about your connections. It takes guts to be vulnerable, to knock down your own walls. The real prize isn't what you build, but who you become along the way. As my family packed up to leave, already planning our next dinner, I felt a kind of peace that no career achievement had ever given me. That cold, dusty garage where I used to hide feels like a story's about someone else, replaced by the warmth of knowing I belong. Have you ever felt like you had to hide a part of yourself from the people you love? What do you think would happen if they finally discovered your secret passion? I would love to hear your own stories down in the comments. And if this story connected with you, please give it a like and subscribe, and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that the people who doubt you the most are often the ones who need to see you fly.